We are being hypnotized by people like this. Newsreaders, politicians, teachers, lecturers.
We are in a country and in a world that is being run by unbelievably sick people. The chasm between what we're told is going on and what is really going on is absolutely enormous.
Oh yeah, dude. There's some Nephilim.
Like we all know what's going down, but no one's saying what happened to the home of the brave. They're controlling us now, and no one's talking about how they made us fight to be slaves. And everybody's just walking around, head in the clouds, and wanna wake up to a dead in the grave. But then it's too late, we need to be ready to raise up. Welcome to the end of days. Everybody is slaves, only some are aware that the government released.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Nephilim Death Squad. I am David Lee Corbo, aka The Raven. That is TopLobsta, the father of disinformation. And today we are joined by two guests in Jonathan and Jacob of the Cult of Conspiracy podcast. We have a pretty interesting topic that we're going to get into today. But before we do all that, gentlemen, can you please, let's start with Jonathan. Introduce yourselves a little bit to the people who may not know you and let them know where it is they can find your work and what it is you focus on.
All right, so I'm Jonathan. The name of our podcast is The Cult of Conspiracy. We have been going at it for about 4 years, a little bit over 4 years now, and we are just constantly hammering on not only modern day, kind of conspiracies, but the old ones that we all know and that we love and stuff like that, and maybe old ones that you've never even heard of. And so we kind of are very stretched across the board as far as everything that we'll cover. We do get into a lot of conspiracies, obviously, but then there's also like spiritual assets that are also brought in. And that's really why we decided to come with this topic here, because Jacob and I are very different. That's my best friend, my ride or die. I never, if there's a fucking Armageddon, like that's the guy I'm calling.
I wish I felt the same about my fucking
I knew it was coming, you terrible piece of shit. Unbelievable.
But that being said, we have very different philosophies about how we look at faith and just spirituality in general. I come from more of what you might call the woo-woo end. Jacob on the other end, Christian. So this topic right here was very fun for us to put together back whenever we first put it together, because he's looking at it from that Christian mindset, and I look at it from the spiritual philosopher, I guess, if you will. And so, I think that's what makes the show, tick, is that it's not necessarily an echo chamber. It's two different opinions and people coming together. And, we usually always end up with the same opinion, though, coming at it from two different areas.
Either the same opinion, or at least we can appreciate the opposite vantage point from a different perspective. And that's the thing. So Jonathan, being more of the spiritual person, he is a licensed hypnotherapist who specializes in past life regressions and speaking to the higher self. Meanwhile, I am a Marine Corps infantry veteran. I am a Christian, and I'm a conspiracy head. So we come from very different places when we approach any type of conspiracy, whether that be JFK assassination, the 9/11 debacle, or if we're going all the way back to the Sumerian tablets and to the ancient texts and everything in between. So I look at things from a very quote unquote logical, analytical standpoint. Jonathan looks at things from a very esoteric and third eye vantage point. And so a lot of times we clash. We don't agree on a lot of things. That's kind of a inherent property of this, but the back and forth itself is kind of what makes this show what it is. I got hooked up with Jonathan about 6 months after the Cult of Conspiracy had launched, and it's pretty much just been all gas, no brakes ever since. One thing led to another, and we're rapidly approaching coming up on 600 episodes released. It's been a wild ride, bro.
Interesting. I'm kind of stuck on, you're a practicing hypnotherapist right now, and what else?
Yeah, it's hypnotherapy, but it's past life regressions. And so if anybody's ever heard of Dolores Cannon, she developed this thing called QHHT, which stands for Quantum Healing Hypnosis Therapy, and it guides people to a past life through hypnosis. And then afterward, typically people will give me some questions that they would like me to ask their higher self after the past life. And those questions, I mean, you're talking about questions that people would want to ask the universe, ask God, ask spirit guides or whatever. And so obviously it's unthinkable, it's unknowable information that you're searching for. And what's great about it is that you're getting those answers, but they're coming out of your mouth. So you can call it channeling, you can call it, just conversations with your higher self or your highest self or whatever the highest ascended version of you or whatever is. But those answers are coming through. And as a matter of fact, I actually hypnotized Jacob about a year ago, somebody who doesn't even believe in reincarnation outside of one person, and doesn't believe in past lives. And yet I was able to hypnotize him. He had a whole life as a Muslim, by the way. Yeah. And all the questions that he had asked were all the things that
I can see that. Like I can see this dude in the cave. Can you see him in the cave?
Yeah, I can't tell if you can see what's behind me, but I do boo hurt. I do armored combat, right? So like cage fighting with steel and swords and that's what I.
Yeah. Wait. This is crazy because somebody.
Stop it. Wait. See, this is what I'm saying. We're not talking about the Shroud of Turin right now. You guys know that, right?
We're not. This is what I do. Like I'm actually the team captain of my local team. All right, so we beat the hell out of each other wearing 80 pounds of steel armor. We go completely ham. It's a blast. It's a rip snorting good time. But, and me being a Christian who does these things, all of that. Jonathan hypnotized me, and we had been teasing our cult members, as we call our listeners, our cult members, for a long time, saying, fine, I'll finally do it. I'll get hypnotized. Gentlemen, I'm going to tell you right now, I don't believe in reincarnation. I don't believe in past lives. But I also cannot cleanly describe logically what that was. Okay, I lived an entire life as a Muslim dude who was fighting alongside the Christians during the Crusades. Okay, I lived the entire life and all of this. Now, could that
in the hypnosis?
Yes,
in the
So there was a time dilation issue, right? Because you would have had a lot of experiences in a relatively short amount of time. There's a story with Ari Shaffir. Ari Shaffir takes he's a stand-up comedian. He takes
I love Ari Shaffir, dude.
What's the I've smoked it before. Salvia. He takes salvia and he ends up going on this trip where he has an entire life underwater. He's got a family. He's got a job. He lives under the ocean somehow. Yep. And it was so real that when he came out of this experience, there was actually like, a longing for this family that he had left. That's how real this experience was. And I don't know what to do with that information. When I hear ideas about reincarnation, I'm also a Christian, but I believe that we talked to somebody one time, or maybe it was I who talked to him, who said that he had an entity that was a hitchhiker, essentially, and he had a relationship with this entity, and this thing would loosh off of his energy, and who knows if this story is real or not. But one of the things that I found interesting that he said was that there is a karmic system and there is a reincarnation cycle, but it was not created by God. If it was created by God, it would be perfect. It was created by angels. God commissioned them to create it. Allegedly, this is all just, something secondhand that he has from this entity. Who knows if it's even real, but that because it's not created by God and it's not perfect, it's kind of backed up and screwed up in a lot of ways over time and over generations. It has become essentially a mess. And I just thought that was fascinating because there are a lot of instances like what you're describing where like, I just don't know where to place it, man. I don't know what to do with a little boy who says, this is the house that I lived in. This is the family that I had. We had a dog. I died in the ocean. And then they all of a sudden they go to his house and they find out, well, yeah, David, there was a little boy that passed away here.
Let me ask a question to Jonathan. What is hypnosis? And I don't mean to cut you off in the story, but like,
no,
you're not just putting somebody to sleep, but are you transporting them to another dimension, another realm where they are living this? What is hypnosis?
I would ask you the same question, but referring to a dream. What happens whenever you dream at night? Are you going to another realm? Are you going to another world? I mean, this is all up for conjecture. Are you traversing the parallel realities that we're living in? There's no way of really proving it. So I don't know exactly what's going on. However, I will say that Dolores Cannon, she is very famous, or she was very famous. She passed away in 2014, I believe, but she was very famous for having these crazy, like insane stories within past life regressions, so much so that she hypnotized a person and she went back to, well, I don't know if you can even say that she went back. She was basically talking to Nostradamus and was able to get all the information from Nostradamus and essentially fill in the gaps that were left open for interpretation of all of Nostradamus's prophecies. And so this kind of crazy happens all the time. And what's even crazier about that is that not only was she able to hypnotize that person to talk to Nostradamus, that person ended up having to move out of state. So she wasn't able to get hypnotized by Dolores anymore. But what she said was during that last hypnosis with this person who was essentially Nostradamus, I guess you could say, is that the next person you hypnotize, you will be able to receive information from me. And sure as hell, that's what happened. The next person that she hypnotized didn't tell this story to, didn't relay that information to, was able to get information from Nostradamus to continue on filling in all of the intricacies and all the interpretations that were lost, and filled them in and created a whole book under, like, to be able to better understand Nostradamus's prophecy. So call that what you want, but like I believe, and also another thing that Nostradamus was saying in this hypnosis was that you're not time traveling. You're talking to me in real time. I'm here. There is no such thing as past. There is no such thing as the future. The only thing that is real is the present moment. And so everything, whenever you think about the past, it's just a memory. Whenever you think about the future, it's just imagining or dreaming what it could be. There actually is no proof that the future or the past actually exists in our minds. In our minds,
because that would begin to, I'm sorry to cut you off, but that would begin to beg the question of, like, was there a time when Nostradamus was, pondering, and all of a sudden this face kind of peeks through a veil? We were talking to Juan Ayala recently, and one of the things he talked about was these ascended masters, right? Those alchemists who reach their magnum opus, basically transcending this reality, but popping up back again through history. Different characters will tell stories about, suddenly I was in this moment in my lab, I was working on this creation, I was pondering this equation or question or philosophical quandary, and then all of a sudden somebody pops through the veil and says, hey, you're on the right track, keep it going, and then pops back through. And the way they were described, or the name that was given, was somebody who hasn't been seen in centuries, but the last known writings about them were that they were an alchemist trying to do the great works. And so I just wonder, when it comes to that, is like, is there a time? I understand this idea that time is not the
linear.
present moment. It's not linear, right? They often say it's like a flat disc, but this idea that somewhere on that flat disc, Nostradamus was hanging out, and then all of a sudden had some chick pop through and ask him a couple of questions.
Well, and on top of that, going back to what you were saying about the angel or whatever that created this kind of like reincarnation, possibly like time loop or whatever, this is actually something that the Buddhists talk about. They talk about ascending beyond that, and the idea that you can get out of this reincarnation cycle, which is known as samsara. Right. And that samsara is that continuous loop. All right, you die, you come back, you die, you come back. They're trying to get away from that and ascend into heaven or whatever it is. And so, this is something that, it might sound crazy. Who's to know, dude? I mean, it's all speculation until we get there. I mean, unless you want to take it on faith. I don't think there's nothing wrong with taking it on faith either, I think.
Let me ask you this, because I've had this theory. Are you guys also into politics, sort of?
My YouTube channel drops a lot of geopolitical news stuff. So yeah, a little bit.
Okay. So kind of like lost my train of thought there. No. All right. So with politics, I look around and I look at the people, and when you're looking at this left-right dynamic, you're looking at people almost on both sides as well, but like kind of, there's like, it's not the extremes, but it's a corner of it where they are clearly NPC being programmed to do this or do that.
Yeah.
Okay. These people, do they have a soul? Is what I'm questioning. Like, if we are in this reincarnation loop, because I'm a Christian, but I think that there is something to that. I think that there is something to this loop because it comes up too many times.
Can I piggyback off of that real quick? Just so I think you're having the same thought that I am, which comes from, I believe, the same character who shared that karmic creation idea with us. And one of the other things he said was that there will come a time, and this is just the ramblings of a dude who admittedly would say he's a crazy dude. He's really there as far as his facilities, or his faculties rather. He seems sound, but this is just the story that he told us. And so one of the things he said was that this entity who's been around since before the time of Jesus says, like, reincarnation is real, but there is going to come a time where already there's a disproportionate amount of souls to flesh, and that there will come a time when the last soul is born. And what he thinks is when that time comes, is when we're really going to see sort of, the closing of an age. something apocalyptic in nature. But that idea that there's not enough soul to match the amount of flesh that's being produced is kind of falls into the NPC thing.
It's probably why they're like, start all the babies. Like, we don't have any more souls.
There's levels and levels of why they started all the babies, not just Planned Parenthood. You can go all the way back to the Roman society. They had a certain plant that was so popular in use for abortions that they actually put it on the back of their fucking coins. Wow. By the way, I'm a Christian that cusses a lot, y'all. I'm a club. I am not the type that looks, acts, or sounds like one. Okay, my walk with God's my walk with God. Off, you know what I mean? But anyway, that being said, with the reincarnation conversation, I don't know what to make of it. Okay. Now, yes, I may not personally believe in it. However, I would be out of my mind to dismiss all of the near-death experiences of profound things that they come and wake up from. They were pronounced dead for X amount of time and they saw something. Or these children that as soon as they're able to speak, have this vast knowledge about how to fly an airplane or some shit and have never stepped foot in a cockpit before. I can't neatly tie that in. What I am willing to acknowledge is that there's way more at play here than what my human brain can intake. And I'm okay with that. I see the Bible as a source, not an all-encompassing book, start to finish, of everything that's ever will be, was, or has been. I see our Bible as our manna. It is our portion. It is not too little or too much for us. It's exactly what we needed to hear for what we need to know. With that being said, the past life regression that Jonathan put me through, I don't know what to make of it. I can tell you that the closest thing I can make to it is think of a mushroom-induced trip with no mushrooms or outside sources or inhibitors whatsoever. You actually have yeah. But as far as having a trippy experience that is real, you smell the smells, you feel the feels, you see the things, all of that is as real to you as what you're seeing before your eyes right now, but then you wake up from it. Now, I don't know what to call it. Is Jonathan putting you into a dream state, and that's what happens when your imagination just goes off the leash and just meanders, and this is what comes up? Was there a kernel of truth to that? So that somewhere deep within my recessive DNA
did Jonathan dose you?
No, I can promise I was sober. That's the thing. Jonathan,
next time, let him dose you.
I thought
see what happens.
I thought about next time, maybe taking a little DMT, see what happens. But I'm gonna be honest, man. I want these experiences to be profound and real, and I don't want to be able to chalk it up to, oh, well, that's just because I was high. Oh, that's just because I want to be able to say for sure this was Jacob experiencing this for Jacob. And I gotta say, it's profound. It is.
Look, they've also gotten into, like, if you look at some of the laws of thermodynamics, I think it's the 3rd or 4th law of thermodynamics that says that energy can't be created or destroyed, only transferred. So that is, in my opinion, all the scientific proof that you would need to say, all right, look, we don't know if we're going to a heaven. We don't know if we're going to another realm or another parallel universe or something. But something is absolutely happening when we die. We don't just disperse into nothingness. That whatever you are, the energy that encompasses you, goes on. It doesn't end when the lights go out in this human, avatar, And so that's why I love the past life regression stuff. And I'm not saying that, like, I absolutely believe that this is what's happening. Like, I want to believe that. I have hints of things that may want to guide me into believing that, but I can't say 100% sure, like that in and of itself is kind of a faith-based mentality, which, I think that faith is, it's obviously warranted in a lot of like specific spiritual conversations, but that's not a way to prove it. And so, it's wild, dude.
This is something that I was thinking about while you're talking to me about this idea of this past life thing. It's like you have these instances of people that get into traumatic head injuries, right? And then suddenly they know a different language, or they can play piano, or they're inexplicably good at mathematics for whatever reason. Even though these people, you couldn't argue that there's a genetic, reason. It's not like your grandfather was a fantastic mathematician or, was a professional pianist or anything like that.
Well, you see, the average IQ of a Haitian is 67. No, don't get me started on this
shit. But look, the thing that I'm getting at here is like, okay, if you can have a head injury and suddenly gain access to something that's not in your wheelhouse, right? That suggests that you're tapping into something. When it comes to these regressive hypnosis things or past life memories, could there be something like the Akashic records being responsible for it, right? This idea that the collective memories and experiences of everything in the universe all goes to one consolidated place, whether it's, you know, in another realm or wherever the case may be. But maybe depending on how you tune the receiver, tune your brain, you're actually dipping into. So maybe you're having very real experiences that actually did happen, whether it's in this reality or another reality or something, you know, people want to get into the multiverse, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it was your soul being recycled. Really what happened is you tapped into, and I'm not saying this is just a theory, you tapped into the greater body of experiences of humankind.
So I will read you a piece of the induction. Well, it's not necessarily the induction, but whenever I hypnotize somebody, I do have an induction method.
He's going to make us fucking get naked on stream.
Do
Dude.
not
This dude's about to
hypnotize the
hypnotize
whole
us. Hypnotize the audience. Tell them to pay us. Tell them to pay us.
You're pulling your out right now.
Driving to the Patreon as we speak. We're going there now. Top tier.
But no, there's something very interesting. And whenever people like to say, oh, I got this information from God, I got it from the Akashic records, I think that it actually might be a little bit more simple than that, strictly based upon what I'm saying in this session. So at the end of the session, or at the end of the past life, like I said, I'm trying to guide you to your higher self or your subconscious to be able to answer certain questions that you have that you just can't seem to crack the code to. And one of the things that I say is that I respect the power of the subconscious or the higher self, because I know the subconscious takes care of so-and-so's body and does a very good job of it. I also know that the subconscious has all the records of everything that has ever happened to so-and-so in this lifetime and all the other lifetimes that they have ever lived. So I think it's possible that whenever you look at this kind of information and you couple it with the fact that even biblically and a bunch of other, religious scripts, that they all say that God is within you. And if God is everything, then that means that everything is within you. I look at it that way. And so I think that it's probably hard to really connect with that at a conscious level, but at a subconscious level, there are strands that you can start to pull. And maybe this is where people get downloaded information, or this is where people will get certain prophecies, or whatever that connection to God or the all or the source or the universe, whatever you want to call it, that is all within you. It's just that you got to tune the antenna a little bit,
I
So
think
you're
that's,
not.
go ahead,
that's-
Top.
I don't know. It just seems incredibly dangerous because you're not just like, is the antenna tuned to the specific God that you're talking to? Because I'm of the belief that there's a lot of floating around out there, and it's there. It's in localities. We know that, like, these things are not omnipresent, but they're in this ether, in the upside down, and you never know what's next to you. It might be
Right.
moving around, or you might have moved to its location. So, like, when you open up this doorway, how could you be sure of like what you're getting through?
But
So
at
that actually,
night, though,
I'm sorry to,
you're not asking for outside sources. When he hypnotizes, you're going introspective. You're going within oneself.
And also you are protected. Like, there are certain things that you can say whenever you're in meditation or you're trying to perform some kind of ritual or whatever. If you believe in that kind of stuff, that there are certain things that you can say and your subconscious mind begins to accept. And in my induction method, I have it to where whenever somebody is getting ready to be hypnotized, before they are even hypnotized, they are subconsciously understanding the fact that whatever is going on, they are in this like kind of protective bubble that nothing from the outside could possibly come in. And therefore, maybe that suggests that you're not allowing information from any kind of outside source into that bubble, that, all the information that you're getting and receiving is strictly from you. That's what's in the induction method. You can say, all right, well, who's to say that a demon can't poke that bubble and sneak their way through there? That's all conjecture.
let me ask you this. You mentioned at the top of the show that even though you come from different kind of practices or ideologies, that you often come to the same conclusion. And I'm not asking you for specifics, but like, what do those conclusions often look like?
Well, an example would be exactly what we're talking about right here as far as the Shroud of Turin of Jesus. Although we may have our different understandings and philosophies as to how this was printed onto this shroud, we both believe that it was the actual human living being of Jesus of Nazareth in whatever 30 AD.
Yeah. And so I'm going to be honest with you. When we first looked into the Shroud of Turin, and I'm glad this was an awesome segue to bring in how we do that. Another example is he and I can both acknowledge what true evil is and what true good is. For instance, rings of the elites. We have no problems being on the same side of that argument and dying on the hill of protecting babies. You know what I mean? So more often than not, when you go up the chain of shitheads, we actually do end up on the same footing. But when it came to the Shroud of Turin, Jonathan reached out to me about this. This was back episode 100 and something for he and I. This was years ago. And he said, bro, we need to talk about the Shroud of Turin. And I, being a Christian, I knew about it. And I had known a couple of things. I didn't know the lengths and depths of it that we're going to go over today. But I was like, are you sure? He's like, dude, like the whole thing, we got to talk about it. I'm like, I mean, you don't have to threaten me with a good time, bro. I'm all about talking about things I believe in, but like, okay, sure. And through this research, he and I both came to a very real understanding that while forgeries may have existed, and while there is a camp of thought to say that the shroud itself is a forgery, if this is a forgery, then this is the people who created it somewhere around the 1500s were so smart and so slick at creating a forgery that not only did they get blood types right, not only did they get the scourge marks from the beatings right, but they got the actual dirt from Jerusalem in 0 AD correct. These people were such master forgers in the 1500s that we still can't tell the difference today. That's what we're left with. So beyond a shadow of a reasonable doubt, Jonathan and I can fully stand on the firm footing that the Shroud of Turin at one time did, in fact, hold the body of Yeshua of Nazareth that we know to be Jesus Christ. Are y'all ready to get into it?
And by the way, you know, there obviously, I don't know if everybody knows the whole story about, you know, whenever he was taken down from the cross and put into the tomb and with the shroud or anything. So maybe we should probably give a little bit of a
That's
backstory.
exactly what I was gonna. Thank you so much for doing that, because that's exactly what I was gonna recommend for those people who might not know. I have a peripheral knowledge of it. You know, it seems pretty self-explanatory, and I've watched some videos and such. But I would really appreciate. Let's lay out what exactly the shroud is, and then we can get into what sounds like a little bit of vindication for you guys, because like we discussed earlier, they came out and they said that they've dated it back to about 2,000 years old. So, I mean, you know, great big high five between the two of you. So let's lay out a little bit of what is the Shroud of Turin for those who may not know.
All right, so let's just start at the top here. The Shroud of Turin. A shroud, or more specifically, a death shroud, is a cloth that a person is buried in. Okay, it's traditionally been used in multiple cultures around the world. Have either of you seen the movie Braveheart?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do y'all remember the scene where when his first wife that he married in secret died, they buried her in a secret place and she was wearing some sort of like mesh sheath looking cloth?
Yes.
This would be a death shroud. And that was a traditional type that was used in Scotland at that time. However, there are multiple cultures with traditions of using death shrouds, the Jews, the Hebrews being one of them. All right. Now, the shroud in question is currently kept in Torino, Italy, and it is in the Piedmont region, hence where it gets the name Shroud of Turin. Okay. It is currently held in the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist in Turin, Italy, and it's been there since 1578. Now, the shroud itself in question, as we look at it, okay, let's break down a little bit about how it was made, what's it made of, and all these things. But for the overarching theme of how it came to be, the story goes, Jesus was crucified, but before that, he was beaten, he was flogged, he was scourged with a cat of nine tails. This is a whip that has 9 leather straps connected to the ends were pieces of metal, hooks, bone, whatever you want. It was meant to rip flesh from bone. Okay. And he was beaten with this upwards of, I want to say it was like 300, 400 times, which is crazy because, well, actually, we'll get into the significance of the number of beatings later. But anyway, he was beaten within an inch of his life. A lot of prisoners died in the process of getting beaten in this manner, but then he was made to carry his own cross, the implement of his own murder, to the place called Golgotha, the Mountain of Skulls, where the Romans did a lot of executions. He was nailed to the cross. He was left to suffocate and die. Now, execution by crucifixion is the slowest way to suffocate a human being. Still to this day, there's no other method that comes close. The Romans were able to figure this out through a very, very brutal means of trial and error. It wasn't like Christianity is the only group that did the crucifixion jam. Keep in mind, Spartacus and his whole uprising were crucified by the Roman government when they were finally put down. So this was not a regular type of execution, but it was saved for the absolute most heinous and horrible criminals that Rome would come across. So we know for a fact that whoever was hailed within the Shroud of Turin was a crucifixion victim. We can see that from the marks through the wrists and through the feet. Also, there was only one example of a crown of thorns being placed onto a prisoner's head before their death. In the negative of the Shroud of Turin, we can clearly see those marks as well, but I might be getting a little ahead of myself on the Shroud and what we actually see with it. The Shroud is made of cheap materials, but is a very rare way that it's put together. Think of this as you have like a hoodie. Okay, now you have your Walmart brand hoodie and you have your name brand hoodie that costs $500. They're made out of the same material, but one is more high quality. You with me?
Right,
So the Shroud of Turin was made with inexpensive materials, but in a high quality way. The cloth is woven into a 3-in-1 herringbone twill pattern. It is very rare for the 1st century AD. However, there has recently been another example discovered in a Roman encampment in Egypt. They were doing some excavation. They found this whole, I'm not sure if it was like a chest of clothing or what, but they found clothing materials in this Roman encampment, all having the same 3-in-1 herringbone twill pattern. Rare, but this is yet another historical precedence of the fact that this cloth does date back to the 1st century AD in Rome. This pattern is shown, like I said, in the Hungarian manuscript, as a matter of fact, in 1192. I don't know if I'm able to share the screen.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
Yes,
okay, I had a couple of images I wanted to pull up to show historical precedence to this. Hold on. How do we share screen?
Present.
You're going to see a tab at the bottom. It says present. You'll click on that, and then it'll ask you for the tab that you want to share.
Oh,
Man, you guys are in so far. I am enthralled.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, this is perfect. Very, very pumped.
okay. I am unable to do this. If one of y'all could Google image Hungarian manuscript 1192, I promise you'll see the picture that I'm talking about. It's very, very popular on this one. This manuscript also shows these L-shaped burn markings, which we will discuss in a little bit, but the fact that it was shown in 1192 is very important because there was a fire in the 1500s that has been the subject of a lot of conjecture around the Shroud. But again, getting ahead of myself. The dimensions are currently 14 foot 6 inches by 3 foot 9 inches, but this is after the Shroud was steamed and stretched out in 2002. The original dimensions did in fact line up with the traditional death shroud dimensions that would have been around in the 1st century AD. However, the stretching that took place, they were measured in cubits. I should mention that. So the cubits to feet, it is a correct translation 1-to-1. The stretching in 2002 is what made it a different size these days. Some of those images you'll see, there will be a body on the Shroud, and then right under it, you'll see another one. If you zoom in, hold on, scroll up. I wish I could show them. Damn. All right, right there, where your cursor is, click that one. So on the top of that, you see the body of Jesus. And if you zoom in on the one underneath it, you'll see this herringbone twill pattern, the interwoven side of it. And you'll also see L-shaped burn marks.
It's interesting that they saw fit to even leave that descriptive in the image, right? The pattern that it was sewed into. That's an interesting detail that they tried to preserve. This show is brought to you by the Van Man Company. If you're like me, then you're constantly trying to avoid products that contain harmful chemicals, especially when it comes to skincare and hygiene. From fluoride in the toothpaste to aluminum in the deodorants, avoiding these products can become a full-time job. That's why we're excited to team up with the Van Man Company to bring our listeners a solution. The Van Man Company offers a range of incredible products, like their Miracle Tooth Powder, made from natural ingredients like peppermint oil, ancient sea salt, and baking soda. And the best part? It's 100% fluoride-free. They even offer an aloe mouth rinse. Or how about their tallow and zinc sunscreen, made from ingredients like organic olive oil, organic beeswax, and 100% grass-fed and grass-finished beef tallow. And there's more. With products like tallow and honey soap, coconut and magnesium deodorant, and peppermint beeswax lip balm, you can't go wrong. From head to toe, the Van Man has you covered. Listeners of this show can use promo code Nephilim at checkout to receive 10% their entire order at vanman.shop, or you can click on the link in the description below. That's promo code Nephilim, Nephiliim, for 10% off your entire order at vanman.shop. From head to toe, the Van Man has you covered.
I agree 100%. And it's crazy because we look at medieval art and we look at medieval artwork and it's not the best detail, but they did in fact make sure to leave details when it came to their Lord and Savior. I agree. I think that is fascinating.
That is fascinating.
So like I said, the original dimensions were measured in cubits, but it is consistent with other burial shrouds of this time. The original shroud is 0.04 inches thick and has a thread count of between 70 to 120 micron and a thread count of that per inch, and each thread is about 200-ish microns thick. And now again, we're doing ish, and there's a little bit of tolerance here because this was handmade woven material. There was no factory textiles at that time, so you have a little bit of give and take on that. The brown lines on the side that go up and down the entire length of the shroud actually are scorch marks from the fire in 1532. And as we could see from that Hungarian text, we didn't see brown scorch marks that has become so iconic to the shroud today. That drawing, that manuscript was scripted 400 years before the fire actually took place. So from the fire on, where we start to see the coloration that we know of it today. Let me see here. The 4 L-shaping marks, those burn marks, no one actually knows where those came from, but it is believed to be from burning incense that may have dropped on it. And they believe that maybe the shroud was folded into fourths. So somehow these incense were dropped on it and burned all the way through in the exact same pattern. When they unfolded it, we had 4 L's out of it. Now, again, that's up to debate.
Is that something that you think? Because when it looks indicative of being, folded into fourths and then having some sort of stain, whatever happened to it, and permeate the layers.
Yeah, I personally do believe this, and there are some experts that debate this because that's the thing. There's no record of it, how it got the burn marks. We just know it allegedly was in this place at this day and age. We have a manuscript showing the burn marks, and then boom. Honestly, whoever was the responsible party for those burns probably took that to their grave, because heaven forbid that they be the one to say they damaged the shroud of Jesus. So, I mean,
right.
So fair enough. Another famous painting from 1516 shows those holes again, verifying that the burn marks predate the 1532 fire from the Chambéry in France. So there's another painting, 1516, showing those L's, but not those long burn marks. Right. Cut to the fire happens. I should also mention, the painting doesn't have the scorch mark lines. There are 8 major burns that occurred from molten silver, creating a geometric pattern from the fire of 1532. So how they had the thing displayed in the Chambéry Cathedral in France, big glass case, silver lined framework. And when the fire happened, some of that silver, again, we're not talking like modern silver smithing methods. It was the best they could do. Some of it actually melted and fell onto the shroud itself, which led to other burn marks. There was some nuns that actually sewed on these triangle patterns where those silver molten marks burned. That would be those triangle patterns that we see, 4 of them, as a matter of fact, on the shroud today.
Okay.
Real quick, is there any questions? I know I'm blaring through this information. I'm kind of going at a rapid pace.
Well, Top, I don't know if you have anything specific, but
no, I'm trying to. I'm like streaming through the story here.
So let's keep it going. But before we move on from the topic, I would like to address because everything that you're laying out here is awfully convincing. It seems like they've had this sort of paper trail for a long time. So then I think it was the 80s, right, where they pretty much dismissed it. And it's like, well, with what information did they dismiss it? Because everything that I'm hearing now is very compelling. But I don't want to derail you from what you're doing now. Let's just keep that on the table.
Well, before we get into any more of it, I think that, you could say that maybe some of the compelling evidence would actually come from the Bible itself. And so I kind of want to give a little bit of reference here. I have some of the Bible quotes right here. And by the way, a lot of my research is done by this dude. Well, he's not a dude. He's a father, Father Andrew Dalton. He's somebody who has studied this back and forth for years. He's gone all over the world and gathered information from everybody who is just absolutely obsessed with the Shroud of Turin. And the way that he speaks about it is just, I love people who are, kind of upbeat and very excited whenever they're relaying information, because there are some people who just talk like this and you can't even fucking listen to them for more than 5 minutes without lulling yourself to sleep. But this guy is very upbeat. And one of the things that he likes to reference is John chapter 20, verse 4 through 8. And so this is in the Bible. It says, both of them were running together, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. And stooping to look in, he saw the linen cloths lying there, but he did not go in. So he stooped, The reason why he was stooping is because the tomb is obviously from like first century Israel. They had a stairwell that led down towards the entryway into this cave, and so if you want to be able to get a good angle to see deep inside from where you're standing, you'd have to stoop and get low because the stairwell creates an obstacle to see inside. So he stoops and doesn't go in, but he does see from a distance. Now we get over to John chapter 20, verses 6-8, which is very interesting. It says, then Simon Peter came, following him, and went into the tomb. He saw the linen cloths lying there, and the face cloth, because there was like a face cloth also, which we'll show pictures. It's fucking insane. But the face cloth, which had been on his head, not lying with the linen cloths, but folded up in a place by itself. Then the other disciple who came to the tomb first went in also. And it says he saw and he believed. So he saw all of that. And instantly he was an absolute believer, if he wasn't already before, that Jesus had risen.
So the folding of the cloth is actually very significant to the Hebrew culture as well. Let me explain. In that culture, to that day and age, now I don't know if this is still something that permeates to today, but during that day and age, if you were a guest at a person's house and you were eating, and if you got up from the table, use the bathroom, go get something, whatever, you would leave your napkin folded on your plate. That would mean that you're not done, you're coming back. Okay. If you were done with your meal, you would just wipe your mouth, whatever, leave the napkin any old type of way, they'd pick it up. Jesus folded the cloth, meaning he was coming back.
Man, that is cool, because it sounds like, to a degree, it's like this is just a really organized dude. And it's like, no, this is not he's coming back. I love that. That's gangster. I love that there used to be, like, whenever you think of like, what's a gangster move to pull off today? And it's so sloppy in comparison. The decorum that they had back in the day, folding a napkin and everyone's looking at it like, oh, he's coming back. I love that.
After they've killed you, you fold the napkin, you leave it on the table, and you say, like, I want more.
You put a little chocolate on your pillow.
And keep in mind, the tomb itself, now again, depends on which gospel you read, because the gospels are written to different individual groups. There's conjecture to say that that's why there's fallacies in the Bible. This story doesn't line up with this story. They omit certain details. Like, no, that's not exactly the case. One was written to the Gentiles. One was written to the Jews. One was written to the Romans. There's a reason for these things. There's significance that was put on certain factors rather than others that doesn't negate those facts. There's reasons for all of that. But depending on the source that you read, keep in mind, the tomb was sealed. The Romans were worried that this new Messiah figure, this new cult that he was following or was following him, was going to become a problem. They actually had Roman sentries posted as guards on this tomb. They sealed it with rope and with wax. They wanted to make sure that they wouldn't steal this body to claim some sort of crazy resurrection story. This tomb didn't have any trap doors. This was a cave. The cave was owned by Jesus' uncle, Joseph of Arimathea. There's a whole backstory to that, which also could be why he was buried in such a, like I said, cheap materials, but well-made cloth. Okay, that was an expensive cloth. The clothes that he actually was buried or was murdered in was a double linen cloak. As a matter of fact, when it was ripped from him, the Roman guards started gambling for who would get it because it was such a high-quality garment. To say that he had a rich uncle who also footed the bill for the death tomb, that would make sense as well. So it was sealed under Roman guard. No way this guy got out without anybody seeing. When the women came, they asked the guards to roll back the tomb. And it was. They go in and see this situation. The cloth is folded. He is gone. There's no explanation.
Dude, it's absolutely nuts. But what's really great is that there's a lot of information that you can actually learn about how they used to do things back in the day by strictly just observing some of the markings that are on this shroud. So, for example, a lot of people had always thought that Jesus, he had nails driven through his hands. That's, typically the picture that you'd see, it would be driven through his hands. However, the shroud itself shows that the nails were actually driven through the wrists. The reason behind that is because they found out earlier when nailing people to a cross that the nail would slide up the hand because there is no bone there to block the nail from sliding up. Therefore, they put it through the wrist, and the bottom bone of the hand would stop the nail from sliding up, which makes a lot more sense if you're trying to keep somebody there for days.
Yep. And they've
it's
also
very utilitarian, yeah.
Yeah, they've done experiments as well. They would actually put a pedestal just below their feet, not high enough to where they could stand up and take their weight off and get a full breath of air, but just low enough to where they could try to extend the punishment further. And that's another thing that they have done studies on to say why it lasted so long with Jesus. They believe he did that. Also worth mentioning, the whole stab wound in the ribs, why they did that and how what came out of it makes sense, water and blood, and that's the stain that's shown on the shroud. But again, all right, let's get back to it. All right. So, talking about the water stains, there are numerous water stains and blood stains on the shroud. Some of the water stains are from putting out the fire that happened in the cathedral. Others are actually from the body housed within the shroud at one point, most notably around the head and torso. Now, the head, that makes sense, sweat, water, blood, all these things. But the torso in particular, at one particular stab wound to the ribs. Now, again, it's about how many of these victims could have been buried in this manner with these markings, with all of these things. Because there's the school of thought is to say, okay, maybe the shroud is real to the day and age, but that doesn't mean it was Jesus's. It's like, okay, find me another crucifixion victim that fits that bill, homie. There's not many.
Right. You could make an argument that it seems to be that they were, based off of what you're describing, fine-tuning their torturing techniques. Maybe this is something that they like to do, but it seems a lot easier to just say, yeah, he was a real guy.
Yeah.
Well, and also to even add on top of that, like as I was saying, this Father Andrew Dalton, I mean, he gets into the specific details behind this. It is nuts. But what he says is, I'm sorry.
Can I ask you guys a question to maybe like detour from the Shroud of Turin really quick? The Spear of Destiny. I know that do you understand any of the supernatural properties that this thing possibly would have? Because I know Hitler was looking for it, and if it pierced Jesus, it's his last piercing that killed him. There's something to this. So do you guys know anything about that?
Yes, but also it's not what killed Jesus. If you look at the story, he was dead. He said it was finished and the earthquake happened. The Romans stabbed him with the spear later to ensure that he was dead.
Right.
There's already stories about what happened with it. Was it a real thing? The Roman guard that did it, I forget his name, but apparently he got saved in the process and this became an artifact. It gets really, really mixed up in legend and lore, very similar to the Holy Grail, right? The cup that Jesus drank from at the Last Supper. Keep in mind, it was a bread and wine meal, and it was the hand of a carpenter that was serving. Yes, it was this golden pimped out chalice. Like, are you sure? Are you sure it wasn't like clay or wood? That's a lot of things where they get mixed up in the lore and the legend of it. And it honestly, who can say?
Right. And so kind of going back to the whole question, how do people, all right, so there were plenty of people that were crucified back in the day. How can we be so sure that this had to have been Jesus? Well, what's interesting is that there is only one documented case of someone dying on a cross with a crown of thorns, and the shroud indicates that Jesus was pierced on the forehead and all the way around his head. And you can see the blood marks from the plucking of his beard, the overabundance of lashes to his body. Only, by the way, because we said that we were going to go back to that, those lashings. So it said that whenever you would be torturing somebody that was up on the cross, you wouldn't give them more than 40 lashes. Anything 40 lashes or more were only fit for an animal. So you would only give a human lashings of 39. Anything more than that, it would have to be an animal. He got like 400 lashes. And that was just the level of disrespect. So it just goes to show that not only would you would only give that kind of treatment to an animal, but it suggests that Jesus was especially special for this one, and that also shows up in the shroud.
And you got to keep in mind the way the Romans would torture people. Take away the story of Jesus for 2 seconds. Roman corporal punishment. Those lashings was not just the thing they did for Jesus. What they would do, as a matter of fact, have you ever seen The Passion of the Christ?
Yes.
Okay, so you remember the stake that they tied him to when they would whip him. What the Romans typically would do, if it wasn't an execution, but a beating and a lesson learned or something along those lines, they would chain their hands to their feet and force them to heal in that configuration so that they would never be able to stand completely upright again. All of their muscles and skin would have to heal in that way so that they would walk the rest of their life and everyone would know what type of criminal they were. Okay, now the whole 39, oh wait, not 40, they would just swap tools. They just went from the sticks to the cat o' nine tails to the this, and they would just swap up to keep it quote unquote legal. So Jesus took over 400 lashes, and to the point about how many crucifixion victims could this have been in this death shroud. Here's the deal. There is only one other case of a crucifixion victim getting proper ceremonial Hebrew burial. Okay, here's the reason. Typically, if you were getting crucified, you did something so bad that even Hebrew law acknowledged you to be a criminal, and they weren't going to give you some sort of honorary burial. Okay, like that's not a thing. So for the other guy that did it, I forget the entire story, but he was wrongfully accused of something. It was a theft of some type, and the Romans crucified him, but his tribesmen, tribe of Judah, tribesmen, gave him a proper burial. The only other example is whoever was buried in the Shroud of Turin, and yet again, there's no other record of somebody who got that type of beating, that crown of thorns, the beard plucked. Then again, to the forgery side of things. Here, all right. This is what's going to mess y'all up. And we're going to talk about the 1988 tests that were done on the shroud. All right, here we go. Through spectroscopal scanopy, dirt was found on the feet, cheek, and arm, all indicating that the soil in question comes from the roads of Jerusalem from the 1st century AD. Now, this was contested because, oh, how can you even tell that? What about, okay, here's the deal. Later tests from X-ray microfluorescence and scanner electron microscopy confirmed these results. The way they did this is that the dirt was made of limestone and calcite. Now, the limestone and calcite have this weird ability to leave a signature. Very similar to, have y'all ever seen a flint napping? You know, like back in the day, cavemen would flint nap an arrowhead, or they would flint nap a stone knife or something. We can take that piece of chert, which is what that flint napping thing is called, and we can tell what mountain range that came from because certain stones leave a signature, so to speak. They're made out of the same type of materials. Matter of fact, there was a stone knife that was found in North Carolina who, come to find out, came from a mountain in France 30,000 years ago, and they're still trying to figure that one out. But when it comes to the dirt in question on the Shroud of Turin, through all of the electron microscopes, through all of the X-ray bioluminescence, all of the stuff, they can confirm beyond any shadow of a doubt that the soil question in sample, soil sample in question, got that backwards, came absolutely without any shadow of any doubt from the streets of Jerusalem in the 1st century AD.
And to really tie that in even more, to get a little bit more detailed, it's that it was determined that it was calcium carbonate with remnants of strontium, and its crystalline structure, whenever looked under a microscope, it also had travertine aragonite, which, according to geologists, they say that it matches the soil of the grottos in Jerusalem like a fingerprint. Wow. Like, that's how specific it is. And therefore, there's no way that it could have been fabricated in France, like some people may suggest.
Now, before we get into the image of the body on the shroud, because that's where my next notes go, is there any questions about things thus far?
I mean, where I was going to go next was going to be what caused the image. That's actually what I have written down here. So this is kind of perfect, because it's like, you know, I can imagine there being some sort of an image left on a body, but as pronounced as it is, it's definitely unique. And I do think very often about how would that sort of an imprint be left?
Well, there is so much interesting information backing that as well. So there have been scientists that have been trying to figure out how to even recreate this whole Shroud of Turin, right? Like, they're trying to just, you know, debunk the whole idea. There's no way this is possible, that this can be recreated. Well, some people suggest that it's a painting or a needling or a scorch or some kind of watercolor. But what they've discovered is that the depth of penetration of coloration on the shroud itself is 200 to 500 nanometers, which, to put it in spectrum, is 1/5 of 1,000th of a millimeter. That's the depth of coloration on the shroud itself. And if you take a single human hair and divide it by divide that width of the hair by 1/20th, you have the depth of the coloration of the shroud. And on top of that, if you were to take a razor and just graze the shroud ever so lightly, you would erase the picture of the shroud forever.
So here's the
hell
deal.
Is it then?
Y'all remember when I said that the threads of the shroud were 200 microns thick?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The image only permeates 2 microns
Wow.
of
So it's
this
just
thread where it's
superficial.
found. It is, but so here's the deal. It is not made with dyes or paints or pigments. All scans have shown no indication or signs of this. Not only that, when you shine light directly on the shroud, the image disappears. It is only with indirect light that you can even see it in the first place. Actually, if y'all could pull up a picture of the Shroud of Turin and it in the negative, there's a lot of famous pictures of them next to each other. And I want to kind of go over all of the different discolorations we're looking at because a lot of it has been changed. There's been some things sewn on over the years. There's been some burn marks. There's some blood stains. We're going to go over all of that here.
Some people stole part of it, right?
Well, not stole it. Certain royal families cut off strips of it and gave it as gifts. Well, we're going to get to that in a minute. So I want to talk about the image on the shroud first, and then we're going to go over the history of how it got to where it is today from the tomb of Jesus to Turin, Italy. All right, so that is it in the negative. So if you look at it in the positive negative, here you go. The image that is shown is from a combination of discoloration of the fibers and blood stains, watermarks, and scorch marks. However, the image of the man only penetrates, like I said, the first 2 microns of each fiber. All scans and tests that have shown no signs of any kind of paint or any other type of pigmentation. In fact, indirect light, like I said, is the only way that you can see the image. The position of the body is set in whatever would have been like a traditional burial position. Everybody wants to bring up rigor mortis. I've heard so many people claim that this could not be Jesus because he died in a crucifixion pose. His arms would be stuck like this forever, right? Okay, pause. To any of y'all's listeners, how do you think crash victims that die in these crazy contorted positions get open casket funerals? Rigor mortis is a temporary status of a corpse. It only goes on for a couple of hours. Yeah, the body gets stiffer, but you can still manipulate it. That's what morticians do. Okay, so the rigor mortis of it and him, why aren't his arms raised? That's a silly argument to make, right? We don't really see the details of the image until looked at in the negative, and this was first done in 1898. 1898, in that photograph. The blood is the positive in that image. When we look at it in the negative and we see these random white things that are just protruding and right in the middle of it, that would be the blood stains. Also worth mentioning, when you shine, or I said the image disappears, the blood stains at the wrist and feet clearly show that this is a victim of crucifixion, and also the ribs and head, like we said, is a mixture of blood and water. The blood has been analyzed to be type AB. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that Jesus Christ was AB blood type, because after blood is left to oxidize and be slowly but surely degenerated, unless it is a O type blood, pretty much all blood degenerates into AB. So is it possible Jesus was AB? Yes, but not a guarantee. Like I said, other crucifixion victims have been brought up, but none of them have been given a traditional burial like this, and not showing all of those scourge marks. You could see it in the negative. This dude had 400 lashes. You could also see from the offset angle of them that the 2 people that were beating him, one of them was probably a little taller than the other. You could tell that by the direction and the force of the slashes.
Dude, all right. So, and on top of that, so yeah, they discovered the negative X-ray, what was it, 1898 or something like that. But there was a scientist in the 1930s that argued that the only way the image could have formed on the cloth is through exposure to radiation. There was this Russian scientist, his name is Alexander Belyakov. So he suggested that the image could have formed through intense but short-lasting exposure to light. Others have argued that the X-ray or X-radiation or ultraviolet rays could account for the image's creation. Whatever the source of the radiation might have been, the researchers unanimously agreed that the radiant source was vertical, meaning that the light had to have come from above the cloth. And then there was this Italian researcher, pretty cool. His name is Paolo de Lazzaro. He stated that the radiation, which he believes to have been ultraviolet, it exceeds the maximum power released by all ultraviolet sources of light available even today. He also says that it would require pulses having durations shorter than 1/40 billionth of a second, and the intensities would have been on the order of several billion watts during this 1/40 billionth of a second. So it's crazy because it says that there is no modern technology available that can produce an image like that of the Shroud of Turin. And so you would suggest maybe to the Christians across the world who have studied these findings, the vertical source of radiation was inarguably divine light caused by Jesus's ascension to heaven.
So the cloth itself didn't have something put on it. Okay. And they didn't, it's not burn marks, it's not scorch marks that's left from the body, but they're basically saying a 3 trillion watt ultraviolet lightning bolt just went in the blink of an eye and he's gone. And this is the image that's left. And again, when you look at the cloth, it didn't change the color, it changed the status of the material.
Have you guys ever thought about that kind of a phenomenon, right? Where you have a light shining down, bringing something up. It sounds a lot like UFOs, that the abduction phenomenon. They'll pick up the cow, right, with this light, but it sounds way better than that technology. We get into Nephilim Death Squad that like possibly the aliens are fallen angels or Nephilim types, and they're recreating the technology that they have, but it might be outdated technology at this point. Whereas,
well, what I was thinking about was, and I'm retarded, so this might not even be true. But there's this idea that when a sperm penetrates an egg, there is an inexplicable flash of light.
Yep.
That nobody has any fucking reason for. Nobody can identify why this happens. Nobody identifies where it comes from.
We were talking yesterday about like the IVF thing and Trump approving IVF for everybody. And I was studying it and I was watching. It's crazy. You can watch the sperm fly right into the egg time after time. And when it implants, there is like a flicker.
There's a flash of light. Now that's on a microscopic level, right? Like that's a microscopic level. What happens when life re-enters the body of a full-grown male?
Yeah.
Well, that's where my mind is going. I'm like, what happens when you introduce the miracle of life? A soul enters a body, but it is a body of a 30-year-old man.
Well, if you really look into that even a little bit more, as far as the tiny little flash of light whenever that sperm meets the egg, other people have also done other studies trying to recreate that without the sperm and the egg. And this is where it gets fucking wild, dude, is that whenever you have like a little droplet of water or a little droplet of some kind of liquid, that if you penetrate sound into that little droplet of water, a flash of light occurs. So you could say that this was, I mean, maybe the soul, the consciousness or whatever is almost spoken into existence.
The word made flesh.
Exactly.
This episode is brought to you by Matt Rife and his team over at realrifetechnology.com, the home of the Real Rife machine. A Real Rife machine is an electromagnetic radio frequency device engineered by Dr. Royal Raymond Rife in the 1920s, used to address various health concerns. Unlike imitation devices on the market today, Rife Technology was co-founded by Dr. Rife's relatives and longtime friend of the show, Matthew Rife. Real Rife machines are the cutting edge in wellness technology. I personally own one, and I use it all the time. I like to tune my Real Rife machine to the frequencies that help with addiction, to help curb my sugar cravings. Their Royal Rife machine is recognized as a general wellness product by the FDA. They're great for weight optimization and fitness improvement, mental clarity and cognitive functions, sleep enhancement and mood balance, vitality and sexual functions, digestive health and immune boost, skin radiance and endurance boost, healthy blood pressure maintenance, and more. And while you're on realrifetechnologies.com, be sure to check out the other products they offer and use promo code Nephilim for 15% off your entire order. That's promo code Nephilim, NEPHILIM, for 15% off your entire order when you visit realrifetechnology.com. Wow.
You know, I'm a big fan of frequency. I play guitar, a big musician guy, and that's kind of what got me into conspiracy. When I took a class about what's it called? Like perfect pitch. And the guy was teaching you relative pitch. So he's like, if you can internalize the C note, then you can kind of predict everything that comes before and after. But I noticed that his voice was very like, it was almost hypnotizing. He was fully aware of the pitch that was coming out of his mind. And that served as like a form of mind control. So from there, I'm like, I'm obsessed with frequency. What can I learn about it? What is it doing? Why does it manipulate people? And then you get into the Tesla rabbit hole where he's like, if you want to understand the secrets of the universe, you have to understand vibration, frequency, and something else.
Energy.
There were three important things.
Energy, frequency, vibration.
Oh, I was going to say resonance, but all right, that too.
I mean, that's just, I think there's something there, right? You're talking, because I've heard the same thing about a bubble underwater. I think if a bubble pops, there's like a inexplicable flash of light surrounding that too. And there's just something, it seems to be, I think that's why it's so important. There's something hidden in that we don't understand. Maybe you need like an alchemist to understand it, but the word made flesh, like there's something about that. If everything is energy, frequency, and vibration, and words are sound, and sound is energy and vibration, then there's a bridge there to light. You know what I mean? There's a bridge.
That's why Jonathan read that out actively before you perform hypnosis on someone.
Right.
Yeah, it's like
the whole induction method.
Is there a way, I hate to go back to it, but is there a way that you are cadencing words, or are you like hitting certain inflections? You're very aware of that, at least.
Of course. Yeah. You have to, it's kind of like how women like to say, it's not what you said, it's how you say it. Right. Like that whole kind of thing. And that's actually really true. And then you also apply NLP, which is known as neuro-linguistic programming. So now instead of saying what you want somebody to see, you're suggesting it. And that suggestion allows them, because everybody is this way. We're all a little bit rebellious in our own mind. If somebody tells you to do something, you're like, you go do it, right? But if somebody suggests that, like, oh, this could be the outcome if you did this, you don't have to do it, it's up to you kind of deal, you might be a little bit more open to it. So that's why the whole suggestibility really works whenever you're in a hypnotic state. And so, like, think about it like this. I always like to kind of preface it like this. So there are 4 stages of awakeness, right? So, or just 4 stages of consciousness in general. So you have beta, which is like conversation right now. You're fully aware there. You know where you're at. We're in beta. Like that's the brainwave state that we're currently in right now. Whenever you turn on the TV, or maybe even the people that are listening to this podcast right now, you might fall into what is known as the alpha brainwave state, which is a light trance. And this is why so many people, they watch CNN, they watch Fox News, they're falling into a literal light trance. And this was proven, by the way, by some scientists, I don't know, back in the 60s or 50s or something like that, where they would hook up a bunch of like brain nodes onto your head. And it's monitoring all your brain waves, right? And they did it to like 50 to 100 people just to try and test this theory out. And what they did was they made all of those people sit down on a couch and watch a TV. There wasn't a single person that had these brain nodes hooked up to their head that could watch that TV for more than 60 seconds without falling into the alpha state of mind or a light trance. So you're literally being hypnotized at times when you don't even know you're being hypnotized. And so that's the alpha, and that's just a light trance. It's not like you're full on MK Ultra or anything like that, but you're suggestible at that point.
No, to that also, you have a child. Have you ever had a kid, they're watching Paw Patrol or something like that? They leave the room and then you realize your ass is watching Paw Patrol. You're the only one in the room. Why are you doing that? Because you, without knowing it, fell into a light trance, as human minds are one to do whenever the television's on.
I'm very aware of that. Like I have 2 kids, so like they're watching and sometimes like I'm watching from the outside perspective because I'm trying not to fall into that brainwave pattern. But I'm like, what are they doing? I'm also a graphic designer, so I'm paying attention. What are they doing? Oh, there's a scene change every 3 seconds. Especially with the 3D stuff, the way that it's like curved and lighted and rendered. I'm like, there's some trickery going on here that children can't look past. It's hard for me, and I work in the field, but I still sort of see it.
But there's a reason why I will not let my children watch Coco Melon.
That's
on there is absolutely bad. I don't even know what the concept of the show is. I just know the ingredients that go into it. And it's all about that flicker rate. And the reason why they have that such extreme flicker rate is because they know that the more frames that they can put in to their show is only lulling you into a deeper form of hypnosis. So like, I believe that there's like 3 or 5 frames per second in that cartoon or whatever, right?
They change scenes like I've clocked it. The longest I could see for one picture was 6 seconds.
Yep.
Wild.
They swapped it to a whole nother one, swapped it to a whole nother one. And at first I was thinking, okay, that's just keeping the child's attention. I understand that. But then it's like, wait a minute. they're keeping the child's attention engineeredly, and I have
Yes.
a problem with that.
And it's not just that they're keeping the attention. It's like what you used to do was train a child's attention span to be able to pay attention to long, meaningful stories, right? With like morality and ethics and all these different things. Now, instead what you've done is you just put a cast on their attention span, and you're ensuring that they're never going to have to develop one beyond 8 seconds worth of a loop, because everything that they're watching, everything they're being fed is being catered to the mind of a child.
This is
And
a
as they
plot.
develop, their mind is not going to develop.
It's a plot against podcasting. I'm telling you, man.
That's
We're gonna
exactly
have
what
all
it
this
is.
beautiful information for our children. They're like, I can't pay attention for longer than 30 seconds.
These guys suck. It's not chaotic enough. You know what? The more we do this podcast, the more I'm realizing the importance of your words, right? Because if you can lull people into a sort of trance with your words, and you can alter their brain waves so that they're in beta, and now they're in alpha, they're in a flow state, they're in a conversation state, whatever the case may be, it really rings true then the sentiments of actually who we're going to be talking to shortly, Ed Mabry, who does our Book of Revelation series with us, and he says that the way to engage in spiritual warfare is with speech. And it's like, if we're being subjected constantly to spiritual warfare, whether or not we're actually aware of it, and the way to combat or to fight back or defend ourselves is with our words, then we should probably be extra careful and pick the things that we say, and the places that our attention goes. You know, it's like, that is the subtleties of spiritual warfare. You think that it is, you know, always going to be sleep paralysis, or always something that looks like an alien abduction phenomenon, or always some sort of No, it's the things that you give your attention to, the things that you say, the words that you put out into the world. That's engaging in spiritual warfare.
Well, words are symbols. And although a lot of people don't want to agree with that, or they might just say, oh, okay, symbols, whatever. Whenever you look up at that McDonald's sign, whenever you're passing it on the freeway, you're not just seeing a giant M with a red bar at the bottom. In your mind, when you see that symbol, you're thinking of McNuggies. You know what I'm saying? You're thinking of those delicious fries, a Big Mac, a double cheeseburger, maybe like a fudge sundae or something like that. So it incorporates so much information into that tiny just M symbol. And they know this. And also, like, even bringing it to like a political realm. We talked at extent, like talking about what is it called? Project Mockingbird, right? And so you're even still seeing it today. Whenever you hear anybody talk about Kamala Harris, for example, they always, somebody said this thing talking about how joyful she is, or she's so full of joy, right? Somebody saw that and they were like, you know what? That's fucking good. And we're going to run with that. And everybody started saying it.
Did you notice what it was a couple of weeks ago? It was weird.
Yeah,
Anybody who's it's weird. That's so weird. It's like a bunch of like boomers on TV saying like, that's weird. That's weird behavior. And it's like, this is literally being engineered. It's Mockingbird Media. But yeah.
Absolutely. And so then you saw 100 different, news analysts or news anchors or whatever, just constantly repeat the same old thing. It's full of joy. And what they're doing right there is that they're building the symbol of Kamala. They're trying to encompass literally the word joy. Whenever you think of Kamala Harris, your mind instantly goes, she's so full of joy. That's who I want to vote for.
Never mind
how crazy it is, dude.
Drunk.
I had told my friend Clint, this dude Clint of Liberty Lockdown, he's like big in the political commentary space. And I was talking with him on my other show, and I was just like, I can see why people vote for Kamala. And he's like, I can't see it at all. I don't understand. I'm like, no, there is like an impressionability. And I know people who will be impressionable to what they're feeding and why they would like her. Like, not necessarily like as like a human emotion, but superficial, right? Like this thing, like, oh, I like this. And then they're
telling you what it is. It's like when I talked to my niece is 20 years old. I said, after the, Trump assassination attempt, whatever the hell that was, I go, I think this dude's got it in the bag. I think he's going to win. She goes, really? I think Kamala's going to win. And I looked over at her. I said, really? And you realize you run in like two different circles, and she's 20 years old. She's attached to TikTok, and TikTok is creating the narrative. They're building this character. They are, to your point, Jonathan, they're creating a symbol, and they're engineering all these different word associations with this symbol. And right now, there's a whole generation of Gen Z kids that are going, yeah, I guess she's gonna win. She's the winner, right?
Thank you, CC.
Right. Well, and regarding that whole symbolism, it makes you think like, all right, well, how far does it actually go as far as the occult like kind of nature with this? Because you're essentially casting spells, but all right, well, what also can you do within black magic that has to pertain to like casting spells? And so you also dive into sacrifice, right? And the whole idea of sacrificing something is so that you can reap the benefits from said sacrifice. And there was a very strange anomaly that we actually found like live on one of our shows. We were very curious. So I'm a huge wrestling dork. I love watching wrestling. I have ever since I was a little kid. It's just kind of something that stuck with me. But I remember whenever I was a little kid that there was this old wrestler. His name was Kamala. He was like this fucking Samoan kind of guy or whatever, right? His name was Kamala. And strangely enough, 2 months before Joe Biden announced that Kamala Harris was his running mate, the old wrestler Kamala dies. And you're like, oh, what a coincidence, right? Well, then we go and do a little bit more digging on as far as this whole, all right, the wrestler Kamala dying, whatever. It's kind of crazy, but, it's up for whatever you think. You go and find out what Kamala the wrestler's last name was.
Yeah,
His last name is fucking Harris, dude. So you have Kamala Harris 2 months before she is deemed our vice president for the next 4 years and possibly our president for the future.
And look at how he looks too. Is he a good representation of her? I suppose.
Isn't he top? Can you go to the images? I believe he has like the top hat. He does a Papa Legba sort of an imagery. I think I know he's like the voodoo guy. Maybe he's not. Maybe I'm.
Oh no, Shango.
That
Shango,
was
Papa
the guy
Shango.
that did Papa Legba thing.
This dude is just other kind of voodoo, I guess.
Yeah, the other kind of voodoo. So I mean, this brings me to what we say all the time, which is like at the highest levels, politics is theater, but more specifically, it's politics entertainment, it's sports entertainment, it's wrestling. That's
fun.
It's fun. It's a lot of fun, but that's what it looks like from my point of view. But I don't want to deviate too much because we only have you guys for about 15 more minutes, and I just kind of wanted to go back to because here we are, right? 2024. All of a sudden, we get hit with these findings that the shroud does in fact date back to roughly 2,000 years ago. And then we have a very strange follow-up to that, which is AI then generating an image of Jesus Christ based off of its analysis of the shroud, which I am, on one hand, I'm happy about that information. I go, that's really cool, man. Because when you hear that, especially as a conspiracy theorist or a Christian, you go, this is awesome. I can't wait to look into this. And I love that this is going to be part of the conversation again. But then all of a sudden, on the other hand, you have AI generating an image of Christ, which is very strange. So let's bring it into modern day, 2024. And what are your thoughts on this, the fact that it was dated? And then maybe we can get into this AI thing a little bit.
Well, first, before we even get into that, I kind of want to go over just a short little part as far as the information that was given out back in 1988 whenever they went to go test it. Yes. So there were 3 laboratories that tried to do carbon dating on this shroud back in 1988. And those 3 laboratories were in Arizona, Zurich, and Oxford. They didn't give their individual findings, which is very interesting. They didn't give their individual findings. They averaged their findings together, and they came to the conclusion that the shroud must have been made between the span of years between 1260 and 1390. So
reason for that.
Right. And so what really happened is that the Arizona slide, so there's like a bunch of slides looking under a microscope at this thing and stuff like that. But the Arizona slide 1 got a date of about 1240, while slide 2 got an average date of about 1440. So there's 200 years in between literally 2 centimeters of cloth that they're looking at. And as you move from left to right on the shroud, it goes from older to younger in the space of just a few centimeters. And it's guessed that the sample of the shroud that they were given was a combination of the 1st century material along with the 16th century material, because it kept on having to get rewoven every time it would get flooded, every time it would get burned, every time there was a fucking incense burning or something like that. They kept on trying to preserve it by adding new material to it. And so this is why there's such a wide range of possible outcome. But then you get into, all right, the blood, the dirt, and everything that goes along with it, it drawing all the way back to the alleged time of this actually being during Jesus's time. And I don't know. With that carbon dating,
keep in mind 1988. Carbon dating was still a very new science, and it's getting better every day, but it wasn't an exact science back then either. The Shroud of Turin is the most heavily scrutinized and analyzed artifact on Earth to date, period. More than any sarcophagus, more than any tomb, the Shroud of Turin has been scientifically analyzed more than them by leaps and bounds. Okay. But the shroud itself, the sample that was sent to Arizona, came from near a burnt part. Now, they didn't know if that would affect the carbon dating or not, because their thought was, well, why would it? You mean the spot that had fire, which leaves carbon, would dictate a little difference on the carbon dating of the artifact? It's wild. So it was discovered through trial and error that the only way we can get accurate carbon dating of a sample is if we know the whereabouts of the sample for the entire time, from the time it was left to the time we analyze it. Point being, let's say we find some sort of fossilic remains and it has been underground for this long, and we could say beyond a reasonable doubt that it's so far in the soil and we know it's this old. Then we compare that to carbon dating analytics and we can go from there. Now, if you found a sample near a volcano, your guess is as good as mine because of the amount of carbon that's just going to be all over that, right? But now the shroud itself, before we get out of here, I do want to make a mention of how it got from the tomb to Turin, Italy, and it will kind of give a little more credence as to how some of these dates and how some of these times kind of got lost to the records and why it is so quote unquote controversial. All right. So this is a compilation of what personally I believe is the most likely chain of events. There are a few offshoots that certain professionals say, but the most professionals go along this train of thought that I'm saying now. Okay. It was made from Jesus in the tomb, and it was brought to Antioch in 70 AD. Antioch is kind of where the newly formed, they wouldn't have called themselves Christians, but that group kind of based their headquarters out of Antioch. In 540, when the city was about to be besieged, the patriarch of the Church of Antioch sent the shroud to Constantinople. The city was sieged then after. Interesting fact, the church was the only building not burned to the ground in Antioch in that siege. Cut to that was 540 when it was sent to Constantinople. However, it didn't make it there originally. 554 AD, that's 14 years later, the shroud appeared in Cumuliana, first time that a shroud with an image on it is historically mentioned. Okay, Cumuliana, 554 AD. Now in 574, it gets to Constantinople, and it started to become worshipped on a board, as a matter of fact, in the city. Mentioned in a letter from the French knight Robert de Clare, who participated in the siege of Constantinople, we'll get to that in a second, mentioned it being praised as a holy relic. They took the shroud and they put it on this big board. They laid it out, and it was on this mechanism that every Friday afternoon, it would be raised up and the entire city would worship it as a sign of Jesus and Good Friday, being died and crucified, rose again. They worshipped it for years as a relic, the entire city. Okay, now we don't know for a fact if this was the Shroud of Turin, but we do know that Constantinople was worshiping a cloth that came from Antioch that there's claims to say that it was the shroud. Okay, the shroud was taken by French knights during the siege of Constantinople during the Fourth Crusade. The elites of the city even wrote a letter of complaint to the Pope where they mentioned, quote, the French took the most holy image of Christ, end quote. That was in 1204 when the city was sieged. Yes, the Crusades did in fact siege a Christian city. And if you look at the Crusaders and what they did, they kind of did that a lot. They were making their way to Jerusalem, lost their gumption, settled on Constantinople, and decided to siege it. The Venetian hires went after the gold. The French hires went after religious relics. Cut to the next time we hear of a shroud is in the village of Liry, France, and it is owned by a knight of the name of Geoffrey de Charny. This is in 1349, claiming that it was freely given to his family. Who's to say or not, but that's about 120-ish, 140-ish years after it was last seen in Constantinople in 1204. Then in 1453, Margot de Charny, that would be one of his descendants, deeded the shroud to the House of Savoy. That's the Italian royal house. She gave it to them for 2 castles. She literally sold the Shroud of Turin to the Italian royal family for 2 castles. The Catholic Church was pretty pissed about this and actually excommunicated her for that. It's also worth mentioning here that this is pretty much the last place that we know of it for sure. 1578, Emmanuel Philibert, Duke of Savoy, ordered the shroud be brought to Turin, where it has remained ever since. During this time, the Italian royal family of Savoy fell out of power. Like I said, they started cutting off shreds of it and giving it to people as royal gifts.
Yeah.
A royal decree from the House of Savoy. Thank you for attending our party. Here's a piece of the holiest of relics that we currently have. No big deal. The House of Savoy fell out of power in 1946 after World War II. But in 1983, the royal family of Savoy, who was still alive but out of power, gave it as a gift to the Holy See. And they have had ownership of it since 1983, but they still keep it in the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist in Turin, Italy, where it has remained to this day. And you can go and see it for yourself.
All right. I know we're late in the game for this question, and if it's okay to tell me, no fucking way, we don't have enough time for that. But
it's your time constraints, brother. We got.
I know. Well, I'm saying if you know it's going to take more than 7 minutes, but
Dave, imagine going to an Eyes Wide Shut party and receiving a Shroud of Turin little thing. Like
honestly, I'd be pumped. I'd be like, this is how you treat your guests. I'm not gonna lie. So when we have this image, and we don't really have to get into it too much, but AI does generate an image of Christ based off of the shroud, and it looks very similar to images that have kind of garnered Christian veneration for a long time now. But when it comes to this idea that the modern visage of Christ is actually that of Caesar Borgia, which is that kind of hurts a lot of feelings when you hear that. But I'm open to the idea, certainly, that at some point the image has been twisted and that we've been venerating the some dude's son somewhere. But then all of a sudden you look at the shroud and you go, well, it does maintain a lot of these features.
So let me ask you this. Do you remember a couple years back when they took the Egyptian Queen Cleopatra and they took her skeletal remains and they made an AI image of that, and she came out to be a white girl that looked like Britney Spears, and the internet lost their and they didn't realize that Cleopatra was part of the Ptolemaic dynasty. She was white. Her cousin had red hair. We have mosaics.
She wasn't a king? Come on.
Oh, wait a minute. Egyptians aren't traditionally. That's crazy. That comes from sub-Saharan Africa. Wild. But like, hey, I'm an for that, I guess. I don't know.
Racist.
So, to your point, we have been seeing this image of Jesus, white guy with blue eyes and these curly locks, and that's been the image that was clearly a Borgia.
Well, and also going on top of that too is that you see throughout the years, and this could be argued, it's just my own kind of understanding, which is why I don't really claim a religion. I just like to garner, the spiritual aspects of it. But so one weird thing is that somebody speculated that the reason why his name was changed to Jesus Christ, and you start to see, pictures of Caesar Borgia that was probably, what was it, Michelangelo's fucking boyfriend or something like that, right? And you start to see that through like magic and the occult, that you can essentially incorporate the energy of somebody in the past. We had done an episode not that long ago about how Saddam Hussein really believed that he was the reincarnation of King Nebuchadnezzar.
Yep.
Right. And so you're trying to take on that energy by claiming, look, I'm the reincarnation of that. So you're developing that thought process. It's a weird, like subconscious kind of thing that you can have, different personalities enter into you. Some may call that schizophrenia. But that being said, you would try and take on maybe the certain powers. And some have speculated that the whole reason why maybe Jesus's name changed from Yeshua to Jesus Christ specifically, is because of old boy who was king during a certain period, right? And that's where it gets into Julius Caesar, the JC right there. So I'm not saying that Julius Caesar was trying to incorporate the energy of Jesus Christ and have all the people of all the land worship him as though he is maybe the reincarnation. It's just a speculative thought. But some people will always say, like LeBron James, always calling himself the king. He's always calling himself the greatest of all time. Like, you think of like these terms that we give everybody, that these are symbols. These are things that you can assign to that person's character. So now whenever you think of LeBron, you think, oh, King James. Oh, you mean King James that wrote the Bible? And so these things, they start to stack up on top of each other in the subconscious mind.
I'm going to say this, though. If you ever see an image of Jesus and he's white, that's an incorrect image. I'm sorry. He was a Jew. He was from Nazareth, big nose, curly hair, sucked at sports. That's him. That's the guy. That's the dude. He was a carpenter before power tools. Your boy was like yoked, but not like hitting the gym yoked. I'm talking like workable weight yoked like that. That was the guy. He was your boy. You know,
Probably had incredible grip strength. Let me
oh
ask you,
no, he did. Yeah.
have you guys ever heard of the work of Dr. Jerry Marzinski?
No.
I haven't.
Okay, that's an interesting rabbit hole that I think you guys should go down. Where he's a licensed psychotherapist, but he doesn't think schizophrenia is a mental disorder or hallucinations. He thinks it's actually entities. And you had mentioned that just briefly, and I'm like, oh, they would get a kick out of all of his work. If you guys,
we should pass along his information because I think you guys would have a lot of fun with him.
Hell yeah.
I would love that.
Well, look, guys, this is where we landed. You guys absolutely fucking crushed. Thank you so much for your time. Before we get out of here, can you just once again let everybody know where they can find Cult of Conspiracy?
Yeah, so we're available all podcast platforms everywhere, Apple, Spotify, wherever you're listening to podcasts. You'll be able to just search Cult of Conspiracy and we will be there. If you're interested in our video, unfortunately, we got canned from YouTube so long ago, many times, that now I am no longer able to even recreate a YouTube channel because I believe that they're probably tracking my IP address at this point. Yeah. So we have decided to move all of our video over to Patreon and Rockfin. And if you're interested in checking that out, it's in the show notes of all of our shows, but it's patreon.com/Cult of Conspiracy podcast or rockfin.com/Cult of Conspiracy. And we like to have a great time over there. Every Tuesday night we go live with all of our cult members on the Third Eye All the Way Open tier. As a matter of fact, just this past Tuesday, we hosted the presidential debate, and we're all watching it and tuning in every so often, and it's just always a great time, and it helps support the show big time. And yeah, definitely come check us out. We are hitting on a wide range of all conspiracies and all different philosophies. It's always a great time. So we appreciate you guys having us on here, dude. This was a blast.
Also, if you like metaphysical things and you like hearing about things with the third eye all the way open, go check out Jonathan's spinoff on Meta Mysteries, also on all listening platforms, where he gets all into the ethereal, the magical, the off the beaten path type of information. And also Cajun Night on YouTube. That is my new spinoff where I'm going to be covering geopolitics, boo hurt, and night fighting. And I think I might do some religious content later on. I'm not sure to what level, but go check me out on that. It just launched. It's in the opening phases, but I appreciate all the subscribes and the love.
As far as like socials, we're really the most active on Instagram. You can just find us over there at Cult of Conspiracy Podcast.
You guys aren't on Twitter at all?
We have one. I'm in charge of it, and I suck at it. So
okay,
I
listen, man.
I need to be more active. I literally just quit my job 2 weeks ago to do this full time because we finally got to that point. So we are going to get so many more wheels rolling here in the next few weeks. But
get on
right now. It sucks.
Get your Twitter up. I have like a decent following on there. So like I try to help people like that are, for some reason, Instagram game very strong. Twitter, they're not paying attention. But honestly, that's where the dialogue is going on. So hit me up, man. I'd love to. I'll put notifications on, retweet you, get your stuff out there.
Thank you, dude.
Hell
guys,
yeah, man. All right, guys.
Wait, real quick. Let's just do a quick announcement when it comes to Bohemian Grove. Guys, don't forget to go to brogrove.com. Come to Summerfield, Florida, October 25th through the 26th at the Joke Joint. You'll see Leonardo Joni performing stand-up comedy. Tower Gang is going to be there. Nephilim Death Squad, the one-on-one podcast. Thomas the Paranoid American. Josie the Redheaded Libertarian. Jay Dyer is going to be there. It's going to be awesome. It's a 2-day event. It's all conspiracy comedy and politics. If you want your tickets, go to brogrove.com and get them before they sell out because they are moving fast. So, and we're closing in October 25th through the 26th.
All right, Dave, stop grifting. They got to go. See you later, guys.
All right. Peace.
The greatest hypnotist on planet Earth is a oblong box in the corner of the room. It is constantly telling us what to believe is real. If you can persuade people that what they see with their eyes is what there is to see, you got them. Because they'll laugh in the face of an explanation that portrays the bigger picture of what's happening. And they have.